The renowned federal judge Henry Mallory, known for his integrity and firmness against organized crime, is found dead under mysterious circumstances in his apartment in Washington, D.C. The news shocks the legal community, raising suspicions of a possible murder. At the funeral, the atmosphere is tense and uncertain. Colleagues and friends whisper about how determined Mallory was in his fight against corruption, and many believe his death is linked to a recent case he was judging. Clara Morrison, a young lawyer with a promising future, is chosen by her mentor, the veteran lawyer Jonathan Baker, to investigate the case. Clara, still coping with the recent loss of her mother, who was also a judge, initially feels insecure about taking on such a delicate task. However, she accepts the challenge, driven by the desire to honor her mother's legacy of justice and the respect she had for Mallory. While analyzing the documents left by the judge, Clara finds a sealed envelope marked "Confidential." Inside, there are a series of notes and a list of coded names. Intrigued, Clara begins investigating the names and discovers that many are linked to old corruption cases that had been filed away unresolved. A pattern begins to emerge. All the names on the list belong to judges and prosecutors who had faced or investigated organized crime and were, in some way, silenced. As Clara delves deeper into her investigation, she realizes she is being followed. Suspicious, she meets with investigative reporter Tom Willis, a journalist who had been collaborating with Mallory on an investigation into a corruption network within the judicial system. Tom reveals that Mallory was about to expose a major scandal involving high-ranking figures, but his sudden death interrupted everything. Determined to continue Mallory's work, Clara begins connecting the dots between the names on the list and unsolved murder cases. She realizes she is dealing with something much bigger than she imagined, a conspiracy reaching the highest levels of power. With each new discovery, Clara feels the walls closing in, and the threats to her life become increasingly palpable. The tension escalates when Clara discovers that her own mother, before she died, was involved in investigating the same corruption network. Feeling betrayed by those she trusted, Clara is forced to confront painful truths about her family and the justice system to which she has dedicated her career. Clara is approached by a stranger who delivers a threatening message: "Stop now or face the consequences." Determined not to be intimidated, Clara knows she is only beginning to unravel the dark plot that led to Mallory's death and now threatens her own life. After receiving the threat, Clara Morrison increases her precautions, moving cautiously and sharing less information about her progress. However, she remains determined to uncover the truth behind Judge Henry Mallory's death. With the help of Tom Willis, the investigative reporter, Clara begins deciphering the coded names on the list found among Mallory's belongings. The list proves to be a key to understanding the scale of the corruption. Each name represents a person somehow linked to dismantling criminal networks or exposing corrupt practices within the judicial system. Clara and Tom discover that many of these individuals suffered mysterious accidents, were victims of attacks, or, like Mallory, died under suspicious circumstances. This network of eliminated or intimidated people appears to be the work of a hidden organization, which Clara and Tom begin to call the Shadow Court. As Clara and Tom advance in their investigation, they discover a name on the list who is still alive: retired prosecutor David Kingsley. Kingsley is a reclusive man living under police protection after surviving an assassination attempt years ago. Clara and Tom seek him out for more information but find a visibly terrified man reluctant to speak. With much insistence, he finally reveals that the Shadow Court is a powerful network of lawyers, judges, and politicians, all working to protect the interests of large corporations and criminal organizations. Kingsley mentions that the network was responsible for manipulating trials, hiding evidence, and even eliminating threats to maintain power. He confirms that Mallory was about to expose a money laundering operation involving several high-ranking figures before his death. Kingsley, who had previously tried to do the same, was targeted for assassination and silenced by constant threats to his family. The meeting with Kingsley is a turning point for Clara. She realizes that the danger is greater than she imagined and that those who tried to bring justice before her suffered greatly for it. Even so, Clara refuses to give up. Motivated by the memory of her mother and the desire to honor Mallory's memory, she commits even more to the cause. As Clara and Tom get closer to the truth, they face increasing pressure. Clara's office is vandalized, and Tom receives anonymous threats to stop investigating. Despite this, they find strength in each other and their commitment to the truth. They decide that the only way to protect themselves and expose the Shadow Court is to make their findings public as soon as possible. Clara and Tom plan a press conference to disclose their findings. However, they know time is against them and that the Shadow Court will do everything to prevent the truth from coming out. As the tension rises, Clara prepares for the inevitable confrontation, aware that the next step may be the most dangerous of her life. As the press conference date approaches, Clara Morrison and Tom Willis intensify their efforts to gather enough evidence to expose the shadow court. They meet with various confidential sources, including former colleagues of Mallory and investigators who worked on related cases. One of these sources, a retired FBI agent named Robert Lang, reveals crucial information about the money laundering operation Mallory was investigating. According to Lang, the operation involved international transfers of illicit funds to finance political campaigns and bribe public officials. As Clara and Tom compile the evidence, they realize that some influential figures mentioned in the documents are still in power. Among them is Gerald Haskins, a prosecutor Clara knows personally. Haskins has always been seen as a defender of justice, but the documents indicate he has direct ties to the shadow court. Clara faces a moral dilemma, knowing that exposing Haskins will mean destroying the reputation of someone many, including herself, respect. Meanwhile, the pressure on Clara and Tom mounts. They begin receiving anonymous calls with more explicit threats and even nocturnal visits to their homes. One night, Clara finds her door ajar and realizes someone entered her apartment. She calls the police, but nothing is stolen. It is clear the intruder was there to send a message: Clara is being watched. Despite the threats, Clara and Tom press on. They outline a detailed plan for the press conference, where they intend to present the evidence irrefutably. However, on the eve of the event, Clara receives an unexpected visit from Gerald Haskins. He claims to be aware of Clara's investigations and tries to persuade her to stop, arguing that releasing this information could endanger many lives, including hers and Tom's. Haskins, in an attempt to appeal to Clara's emotional side, reveals that he knows the truth about what happened to her mother. He insinuates that her death may not have been natural but a disguised murder ordered by the same powerful network Clara is trying to expose. Clara is shaken by this revelation, but Haskins refuses to provide further details, saying only that she is playing with fire. Clara finds herself at a crossroads. The revelation about her mother leaves her furious and determined to proceed, but the growing threats and Haskins' warnings make her fear the consequences. Tom, on the other hand, encourages Clara to continue, emphasizing that it is time for someone to have the courage to expose the truth, regardless of the risks. Clara and Tom discuss the final details for the next day's press conference. Clara, still haunted by Haskins' words, looks at the clock and wonders if she is ready to face what lies ahead. She knows that by dawn, their lives will never be the same. On the morning of the press conference, Clara Morrison and Tom Willis prepare for the decisive moment. The tension is palpable. Clara feels a mix of nervousness and determination as she reviews their speeches and the evidence they intend to present. Tom, ever the optimist, tries to calm Clara, but he can't completely hide his anxiety. They know they are about to face a storm of repercussions. Meanwhile, on the way to the event, Clara receives a call from a familiar voice, Gerald Haskins. He insists that she must cancel the conference, revealing that additional information has come to light and that the shadow court is already moving to neutralize them. Clara, determined not to give in to intimidation, hangs up the phone, more resolute than ever. Upon arriving at the conference venue, a surprise awaits them. Prosecutor Gerald Haskins is present, and contrary to what Clara expected, he is not there to stop the conference. Haskins approaches and, in an unexpected move, offers his support to Clara. He explains that, over the night, he reflected on his choices and decided it was time to end the double game. He hands Clara a dossier containing additional evidence that corroborates her and Tom's investigations, including recordings of compromising conversations between members of the shadow court. The press conference begins with Clara and Tom presenting the collected evidence. Clara speaks about the courage of Judge Mallory and others who tried to fight corruption, highlighting the connections between the shadow court and several unsolved murder cases. She reveals Haskins' role, now turned ally, who publicly confirms the existence of the corruption network and his reluctant participation, under duress. However, during the conference, an emergency is reported. Clara receives a message that an attempt on her and Tom's lives is being planned, aiming to silence them once and for all. The police and the FBI, already alerted to the risk, act quickly to protect Clara and Tom, but chaos ensues. In the confusion, Clara and Tom are taken to a safe location, but the imminent threat looms over them. In the hideout, Clara and Tom reflect on what has happened. The public revelation has brought to light only part of the truth but also put them directly in the crosshairs of the most dangerous members of the shadow court. Haskins, who is also under protection, reveals darker details about the network's activities, including a plan to manipulate the appointment of federal judges, ensuring that members of the shadow court remain unpunished. With the evidence now public, Clara and Tom know that the legal and moral battle is just beginning. They need to continue the fight not only to dismantle the shadow court but also to reform a system that allowed such corruption to take root. Clara, Tom, and Haskins stay hidden in a safe house while the media and the public begin to react to the revelations. Clara feels somewhat safer but knows the storm is far from over. The great final twist is yet to come, with implications Clara can hardly imagine. Clara Morrison, Tom Willis, and Gerald Haskins remain hidden in the safe house, protected by a team of federal agents. The outside world is in turmoil. The revelations about the shadow court have shaken public confidence in the U.S. judicial system. Clara feels the weight of her actions but also a renewed sense of responsibility to ensure justice is done. As the media speculates and investigations intensify, Clara receives an unexpected visit from FBI Director Richard Edwards. He brings alarming news: a significant portion of Mallory's documents has not been found, and some members of the shadow court have managed to escape preventive detention, including one of the network's most influential leaders, Judge Edward Granger. Edwards asks Clara, Tom, and Haskins to continue cooperating with the FBI to locate these critical documents and help capture the fugitives. In the following hours, Clara and her team discover that Judge Granger plans to use the missing information to bargain for immunity or destroy evidence against him and his allies. A race against time begins, with Clara and Tom using their connections and legal knowledge to track Granger's movements. They find out that he plans to flee the country, taking the documents with him. In a surprising twist, Clara receives an anonymous tip from someone within the shadow court, who apparently regrets the network's actions. The tip leads Clara, Tom, Haskins, and an FBI team to an isolated mansion where Granger is hiding. In the final confrontation, Granger is arrested, but not before threatening Clara and her allies, insinuating that many others are still at large and that the network may never be fully dismantled. With Granger in custody and the documents recovered, Clara and Tom organize a second press conference where they reveal the full extent of the shadow court's activities. They present evidence that the network had ramifications not only in the judiciary but also in major corporations and politics, influencing decisions and manipulating the system in their favor for decades. The full exposure leads to a large-scale federal investigation, mass arrests, and promises of judicial system reforms. Clara and Tom become public figures, symbolizing the fight against corruption. Meanwhile, Haskins fully cooperates with authorities, providing valuable information in exchange for a reduced sentence. In the days that follow, Clara reflects on the events and the consequences of her actions. She reconciles with her mother's legacy, realizing that both fought for justice in different times and circumstances. Clara decides to found an organization dedicated to protecting and promoting judicial integrity, ensuring that cases like the shadow court never happen again. Clara, Tom, and Haskins say their goodbyes, each following a new path but united by the shared experience and determination to uphold justice. Clara, now more confident and resolute, looks to the future with hope and a sense of duty fulfilled, knowing that although the work never ends, she has made a difference.